All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining this evening. We're just going to wait a few moments right before we get started so everyone can join. I will say while we're waiting, Nick, I tried to get my hands on your book, and it is, at least at the library, all of our copies have been checked out,
Oh, wow.
and the
That's
wait list
great.
is quite long to get a hands on it. So
Oh, that makes me
I'm
happy.
waiting to be able to see it in person. I'm very excited.
So you want to do 30 minutes of questions and like 15 minutes of Q&A?
Sure, whatever works with you.
I think that's what you
Yeah.
said. No, I'm
Mhm.
looking for it. Okay. Cool. Is the noise okay? I have a window open, but I live on a kind
I
of
don't hear
busy
it.
street.
You're
Okay.
Mm. Yeah, I
It
don't hear
might change at any point. But it's like such rare window open weather that I want to enjoy it. Because I don't live in LA where it's window open weather every day.
it. My windows are closed. It's always perpetually hot, but I'm inside. The air is on. I have a sweater.
Oh, um, no, that's like an elite summer experience when like it's a little cold and you still need the comforter.
I
I'm sorry
have
about
a
the
blanket.
ozone layer.
So for someone that lives in Los Angeles, I've lived in Ohio. I went to undergrad in Ohio. I mean, no, to Cincinnati for college, and then Georgetown. And so I miss the part of cold weather where you get to just wrap yourself up and be cozy everywhere.
Hmm.
Really don't. And so I have a lot of blankets that I've collected over the years. They just sit nicely, neatly
Oh,
folded.
like decorative items now. And then, yeah, I guess you people say they miss seasons, but you also have like strawberries growing in February, pea tendrils. So, you've got that. And we're like the saddest produce you've ever seen.
Oh.
Apples that were picked 6 months ago at best.
So you're
Wow.
saying I shouldn't move to New York?
No, I think I should move to LA. I think I should be your
Okay, we
neighbor.
should do
I'm
a house
completely
swap. Let's do a
serious when I
house
tell
swap.
you that.
We can do
At
a
least
house
half
swap.
a year.
Well, let's go ahead and get started. So I want to say good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Hudson Library and Historical Society's virtual author and virtual cooking series. Today, we are so pleased to welcome bestselling author Nick Sharma to discuss his new book that just came out 2 days ago on the 24th.
Yeah.
Yeah. Veg-Table recipes, techniques, and plant science for big flavored vegetable centered meals. And he will be joined in conversations tonight with Deb Perlman of Smitten Kitchen. At any time during the program, feel free to ask questions. You can leave them in the Q&A section on Zoom, and we will try to address as many as possible tonight. You
Mhm.
can also purchase copies of Veg-Table from our local independent bookstore, the Learned Owl, and that link will be in the chat shortly. So now let me quickly introduce tonight's speakers before I turn it over to them. Deb Perlman is the creator and author of the mouthwatering food blog Smitten Kitchen. She's a New York Times bestselling author, and her latest cookbook, Smitten Kitchen Keepers, was a New York Times bestseller and was named one of the best cookbooks of 2022. And now Nick Sharma is a James Beard Award 2 times, I think, James Beard Award finalist. He's a multi-times best-selling cookbook author, photographer, with 3-time winner of an International Association of Culinary Professionals Award, and is also a microbiologist. Um,
Uh, not a microbiologist.
Not my word. Gotcha. He's the best-selling author of The Flavor Equation, The Science of Great Cooking Explained. He's also the author of Season, Big Flavors, Beautiful Food. He's a successful blogger at the Brown Table, and his book Season was named one of 2019's best cookbooks of the year. And most recently, his recent book, Veg-Table, was just named one of the best cookbooks of fall 2023 by Eater, Food and Wine Magazine, Library Journal, and many more. Welcome, Nick and Deb. Thank you for joining us this evening.
Thank you for having us. And
Thanks for
thank you,
inviting.
Deb, for being here, taking the time to be here today.
My pleasure. But don't thank me yet. Let's see if we get through half an
Okay.
hour without somebody coming through with a tantrum or like my kids fighting or whatever. I don't know. Do
My
you have
cat's
witching hours in your house? Do you have witching hours? Like,
witching hours. Yeah, right now, 4 o'clock. But actually, between 3:30 to 4 p.m. in the evening, my cat needs to eat. So he's actually at the door banging and screaming. And then he does it again at 4:30 to 5 a.m. in the morning.
I'm sorry. I was telling my kids the story at dinner because I want to ask you about it later. I find your relationship with your cat hilarious versus your dog, but we're going to get into that. I promise. Sorry. I feel like I haven't figured out how to Turn my notifications off. Okay. My husband's like live texting me for my son's high school. So we're getting all these dings because I'm really good at being tech. Anyway, congratulations on your book. It is gorgeous. It is
Thank you so much.
completely stunning. Did you grow all these vegetables?
Not for this photo, but inside the book, there were certain photos that I did grow and photograph.
Well, I am absolutely in awe of your talent. This is just a really special book. And I can't believe it's your third cookbook and you've written 3 cookbooks. What you've got the season came out in 2019. You have the flavor equation, which came out in 2021, and this is 2023, which means that in like 4 years, you've written 3 books. I wrote 3 books in 15 years. Yeah, 15 years.
But
So I just wanted to know what your secret is to being productive. Like, be honest with me. Is it that you don't have kids? Because I can get rid of mine. Like, I could just get rid of mine right now. Is that the secret?
So I actually use you as a role model for my work, blog, life, because I have my friend Jackie works with me, and I tell Jackie all the time, I don't know how Deb does it, but she does it. She's got a husband. Husbands are demanding. She's got 2 kids, which are kids are demanding too, right? And they talk. So then you have to also converse with them. I said, I've got a dog and 2 cats, and that's a lot. I've got a husband also. So then like he needs to be fed. And I said, I don't know how she does it. She's got like, and then she's so active on her blog. She constantly has recipes coming out every day. I don't know. And I said, maybe I should stop trying to achieve like where Deb is, because I'm so low. It's never going to happen in this lifetime. It's just impossible. I don't know. I think she's got many hands, but we use you as a role model at work.
Well, I'm very flattered, and you're completely wrong about everything. I don't think I've updated my site in like 5 weeks, and most of the stuff I'm running on socials is old, and I'm just reminding people about them because I wouldn't expect that you've already been reading for 15 years. But I am in awe of your productivity. I think putting out a cookbook every 2 years is an incredible feat. It means that you are probably working right now on your next cookbook, and that is just insane to me. Look at who he is. We don't have to get into that. We're here tonight to talk about this beautiful work of art. So you started working on this, I guess, 2021?
So 2018 is when season came out. 2020, they've all come out in
Sorry,
October.
I had the year wrong.
I think it's just because they come out in fall, then everyone kind of mentions them like in the year after +1 or whatever. But yeah, season came out in October 2018. 2020 was the flavor equation. Then I took 3 years to do Veg-Table.
Okay.
I asked for an extra year.
That's definitely out of my playbook. I do that stuff all the time. I'm like, do you want a good book or do you want the one I can turn in?
I was so stressed out asking for that extra year, and they said, it's okay. And I said, whew.
And what was it that took like longer besides the like incredible depth and like huge amount of research and recipes in here? Was there something that surprised you when you took it on that you hadn't expected when you anticipated the schedule?
I'm laughing so much. So the reason why I needed extra time was because I was mentally fried after the flavor equation. The flavor equation kind of was the book where I really got for the first time, like season was the book, it's more of a narrative. This is who I am and everything. Flavor equation was about, this is what I trained to do all my life, and I'm sharing it. So to do a book like that really wiped me out emotionally, and I was tired, like really tired. So I needed a couple of months to not think about cookbooks. And I told everyone, I am not going to look at a cookbook for 4 months. So I need this extra time. Lo and behold, what was I doing on my rest time? I was looking and reading cookbooks. So it didn't really work out that way. I just love cookbooks so much. See, all cookbooks. Right?
But you were choosing it rather than feeling like you were obligated.
Yeah.
I don't actually think I chatted with you around this time and you talked about feeling like you needed a little change. It's
Yeah.
really, that's exactly why I'm actually so slow at cookbooks, is because I do need like a lot of time to just not be in cookbook land so I can be happy to be there. But I'm really impressed because nothing about your book suggests that you were feeling like you didn't, get enough of a break. And I was wondering, so you talked about like the first two books, which are just stunning. All your books are so gorgeous. Why this book? Why now? Why was this the third one?
So I had, coming off the flavor equation, I had written a very massive book. I don't know if we discussed this. So I had to throw out 353 pages, which I still remember the exact number of pages because they didn't give me a word count at the time. So I did crossover quite a bit. And so a lot of that was related to vegetable flavor. And I wanted to do, and I said, you know what, let me just do it in a different book. Let's just revisit it, because my first book is about spices, second book is about flavor. Let's make this a course of, so a series of books that kind of focus on things that I'm passionate about. And this book is about vegetables, and I said I can talk about the flavor, the texture of vegetables, but also introduce vegetables that I had never cooked. So I took on a challenge with this book, and I told my editor Sarah, I said, Sarah, can I cook vegetables that I'm completely unfamiliar with and approach it in a way that the audience, if they are unfamiliar with it, feel comfortable? And so in this book, I took on cassava, yucca, cactus paddles, which I see a lot of. I live in Los Angeles, so I do see a lot of these on the at Mexican restaurants, and I see them in grocery stores all the time. What better way to do that? And it was so much fun because not only did I get to learn about how to prepare these vegetables and cook them, I found that a lot of them can be prepped and used in a lot of dishes that we're already familiar with. So the lens that I present them is in a lot of familiar ways. It's just preparing them, the technique of using them changes.
Well, I noticed that with your cauliflower bolognese, because I haven't seen that before. And I definitely, I could spend 2 hours talking about individual recipes, but since it segues so perfectly here, would you consider that an example of taking something and like showing people how they can make it with a vegetable? I mean, I guess cauliflower is not unfamiliar, but
Yeah. So one of the things this is the first book I've ever done pasta recipes in. I've stayed away from them. And a lot of my followers said, Nick, you never write pasta recipes. Do you eat pasta at home? I said, yeah, I eat pasta. I just never thought about putting it, just never crossed my mind. And I said, okay, what are the dishes that I make at home? I like a lot of simple pasta dishes. I don't have the time or the patience to spend a lot of time with them. So the bolognese, I make bolognese the regular way with meat, but also with cauliflower. And I like cauliflower because it can mimic the texture of ground beef really well. And if you season it, well with things that provide umami, it feels it's very satisfying and filling. And so it achieves that so well. So that's why I put the cauliflower bolognese. And it's also a really short recipe because it's cauliflower, it cooks really fast. It's got canned tomatoes, so you don't have to spend hours making the sauce. And it's pretty much like a shortcut recipe with a lot of like good flavors and feeds everyone.
That's awesome. It looks really good. I was vegetarian for a long time. You eat meat, of course, you eat everything, but I was vegetarian for a long time, and I always felt like a lot of the things that we think we like about meat dishes, we like about the way it's seasoned and the way it's cooked. And so something like cauliflower bolognese speaks very, very much to the center of what I think vegetable cooking should be, which is that it's probably, yes, maybe it's the meat, but it's also a lot of other ways, like, which is how, I don't know how carefully we treat meat, but like vegetables are always like a throwaway item. So I love that you're giving them this like center of the plate attention here in so many of these dishes. I know we talk about your background a lot. You're probably like so sick of talking about this, but I love that you majored in microbiology and chemistry. Have I told you that my mom's a retired microbiologist?
No, we've never discussed this.
Yeah, so the apple fell very far from the tree. I don't know a single thing about microbiology, but I probably have like an excessive devotion, I would say, to like being worried about salmonella.
Okay.
But mostly it was expressed like as a kid, like my mom would tell the story of like someone had a New Year's party and like they weren't that aware of it, and like everybody ended up in the hospital. And I was like, okay, that's just like on that's what I took, and that's what I remember about it. My mom's watching, I'm gonna get in trouble. I don't know anything about this. But for the people who are newer to the world of Nick Sharma, can you tell us a little bit more about your journey from the science world to the food world?
Yeah, so I graduated in microbiology and biochemistry, and then I moved into genetics for my PhD. So I did a lot of cancer genetics, and from there I went into infectious diseases, so a lot of viruses, creating vaccines for viruses. And then I got in science, it's kind of nice. It's kind of like working at restaurants. You learn something, then you move to the next place. So for me, I moved from there to Georgetown. And at Georgetown, I was working at the Department of Medicine, doing a lot of genetics, but related to diseases. Funny enough, a lot of the diseases we studied were related to metabolism. So hyponatremia, that's low sodium in the body, obesity, diabetes, hypothyroidism, all those things that kind of are influenced by our diets. So that was a really interesting space to be in, because that's literally what we were testing and studying. And then because I lived in DC at the time, I thought, oh, I'm going to go into public policy like everyone here, because it's DC, right? And I went to Georgetown's public policy school in the evening. So I signed up. I would go there in the evening. Daytime was at the lab at work. And I was entrenched in academia 24/7. At that time, there were certain sites, one being Smitten Kitchen, that was out there at the time, and David Lebowitz, and Saveur was a huge proponent of food blogs. The Saveur magazine was around that. They're still around, but they were huge at the time, and they would talk a lot about food blogs. And during my experiments, when I had to wait hours for a reaction to take place, I would literally sit at your sites and scroll for hours, because the photographs, they had me in. And that's when I started a blog, and it was originally called The Anatomy of Cooking.
No way.
And it was too much work. So I killed it. It was on Blogger, and I killed it. And then my mother-in-law at the time said, why don't you really like cooking? Why don't you go back and do it, but do it like properly? And because you feel like you've not invested. You're kind of one of those people that needs to do something properly. Otherwise you're unhappy with it. So that's when I said, okay, I'll do it. I'll buy a cheap point and shoot camera and learn how to photograph, because all of you guys had such beautiful food photos, and it felt like I was in your kitchens. And that was the whole draw for me that drew me in. And so that's when I started a brown table, and it was called a brown table because we were living in DC in a basement condo with two windows that were on one side of the house, and I had to learn how to photograph with artificial light. So all my photographs I started out with artificial light. I got a lamp from Target. You remember those ones with a spine, like a swan neck that you could bend?
Yes.
Okay, so I had one of those, and I bought a white light, put a white t-shirt around it, tied it with a string, and then over the recycle can and the regular garbage, I put 2 pieces of wood, and I created the illusion of a brown table. And we never had a table at that time.
Do you have your first book there? I know we're talking about your third book, but I remember the cover is such a striking image, and I know you had used lights for it, but it's just, you were so talented. You were so like, I don't know anything about using lights. I can't even get the ring light that I set up to like hit my face right now. So I'm in a shadow. That's how little I know about lighting. I just try to do things by windows, but it taught you something incredible. Did you do your photos for this third book too? Because
I've done the photos for all my books. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Okay. I feel like we're in a rare club of crazy people who do our own photos. It's just not, I feel like it's not that common, but something I noticed this time, we're not going to be here to talk about my books. For my last book, I outsourced the food styling. I decided I needed to take one thing off my plate, and I brought in a food styling team. And I basically just pick people who do things the exact way I like to do it when I'm more patient to do it. Anyway, I found it really interesting because previously my books have been a very quiet experience. I never had people around, and that must be what you experienced too. It's not a crowd in a kitchen studio. It's like just you hanging out. When you're not happy, you do it again. You do all this. First, you're doing all the styling too, right? It's a different
experience. So before I shot Season, my first book, I wanted to understand how professional people actually shoot a book, because I said, oh my gosh, they expect me to photograph a book. I've never done it. What if it looks like crap. So I reached out to a bunch of food photographers in San Francisco, Oakland, because that's where I lived at the time. And one photographer said, yeah, come and assist me. I know who you are. I'll show you around. And I'm shooting these books for Williams Sonoma. So I went in as an assistant on a couple of books and saw how they shot. And then the stylist would come in, and there's a separate person to cook. And they knock out 6 dishes a day. And everything is so organized. The stylist comes with the assistant stylist. There's luggage that comes along with paintbrushes and paper towels. I don't do all of that for myself, but it gave me a sense of planning and some of the tips and tricks that they use.
Do you, I know this is probably not exciting to any, this is a question for me, obviously, and then I promise we'll get back to the content. Do you shoot all your photos at the end, or do you shoot as you go?
It depends. So most of the time it's at the end, but this book is, because it's so seasonal in concept, I had to get the recipes knocked out of the ballpark, get it tested by my recipe tester, and then photograph. So like okra was shot during okra season a long time ago,
That makes
and
sense.
it was done.
That's great. Okay, so I want to talk about, I know we're talking about the cooking, but how did you get into gardening? Because you have this incredible, like from my perspective, you have like the most amazing garden I've ever seen. Maybe you're just a good photographer, or maybe it's actually the most amazing garden I've ever seen. And how do you feel like your gardening? I think, it definitely informed what you wanted to go with this book. So let's talk about it.
So I fell in love with gardening when we lived in Oakland, because in Oakland, for the first time, we had a large enough space in the backyard for me to grow a few things. And there's a designer who I met through another cookbook author, Brian Terry, who I'm pretty sure you're familiar with. Brian.
Amazing.
So Brian's a really great chef and also a really good community builder. And he lives in Berkeley or Oakland. I can't remember which city exactly, but we're all next to each other. And so Brian introduced me to this lady who does edible garden designs, and her name is Leslie. So I met up with Leslie. She came over, she drew out a design, and then I said, I'm going to do it myself. And we had a really small patch, and so it was doable. And we did it, and it was so much fun. I really enjoyed the fact that, of course, the climate's nice in Oakland. It's cooler, it's not too hot, the weather's right. So we were able to do so many things and grow so many flowers and vegetables. And then that kind of brought on, like, a lot of the science that I had learned in school was about, and not in college, like in school, my love of science came from doing the silliest things like growing seeds. When they tell you soak wet cotton, you put your beans on them and then they grow. So those are the kinds of things that drew me in. And then I said, you know what, I'm going to try that out here and just see where it goes. So like in the book, there is a photo for the bean chapter. When you open it, there's a photo of all the beans from different colors. And I had leftover cranberry beans from, I think, Rancho Gordo or some grocery store. And I said, what if I take the challenge of just planting this in the ground, and then maybe I could take a photo of the vine for the book. Luckily, it produced all these pods, and they were all at different stages of ripening. So I put those in the book in the cover photo. And then there are some cabbages that I grew for the book, but I never got to eat them. Luckily, the photos made it to the book, but we had deer at the time, and the deer got to the cabbage.
That's what my mom always used to complain about when we had a garden in the backyard. Cranberry beans are one of my favorites. They're just so beautiful to photograph when they're fresh. There's nothing like them. I think I have a photo of them in my first book too. They're pink and white. They're just
so pretty.
Gorgeous.
Yeah.
And then you cook them and they're like muddy purple gray, but
the color's all gone. The appeal is gone.
So I love how that informed this third book. Did you have more fun writing this one? Does it ever get fun? I mean, this part maybe. The it's out in the world and we love it part.
Yeah. I will say this book was actually, from a creative standpoint, it was the funnest book because just like the flavors and the ingredients that I used, I didn't hold myself back with this one. I went wild and I informed them. I said, I'm going to make it really simple and easy for people, but I'm going to take full advantage of the ingredients that people most often have in their pantries, because I'm a huge believer in opening the pantry and just using up things. And so like lemon preserves come into the book, and then you've got all these different like red pepper flakes and stuff. So I had so much fun creating these recipes. So from that standpoint, this was a really fun book. When I got into the part about like the research, that I love that. and just like going through all these research papers and finding out where these vegetables came from. There are controversies from where vegetables originated. What is a vegetable is controversial because there is technically no word as a vegetable in science. So all of that stuff was so much fun to just read and hear people's opinions from all over the world. And then talking also just to cooks who prepare things that I've never cooked, like the cactus. And so it was just so much fun just learning from people. So I really enjoyed this book.
That's awesome. And I love what you say about like this idea that you should feel comfortable going into your fridge and making these dishes with other vegetables. Cause I think that's what most people do. Most of us are not like, oh, I want to make this recipe. I'm going to go like completely out of my way to go to the grocery store for one ingredient. They're going to say, no, can I make, you know, that those jokes everybody has about online recipe comments are like, can I make your cauliflower bolognese with broccoli? Like, yes, you can. Yeah. They're not asking it because they don't respect your recipe. They're asking it because broccoli is what's in the fridge. They want it for dinner. I love those questions, by the way. Love internet comments.
I'll leave one.
What was that? Sorry.
I'll leave one on your blog tonight.
Oh my goodness. I'm a little behind on checking them. But I'm going to catch up probably today or tomorrow or the next day. I loved all your vegetable roasting tips. I felt like they were just like on a completely, because I think all of us are like roasting vegetables. I've got that. Like they were on a completely different level. Would you mind walking us through one or two? That there were a couple, there was one that like, there was something about avoiding water. And then I mean, I guess we kind of know that, but I just thought it was I really liked your devotion to the process. Cause I think most of us know when you've got a bunch of things, you can throw it on a sheet pan with some olive oil, salt and pepper and make a pretty solid dish. Add some feta, add an egg, you've got dinner. But I liked there was just a couple that kind of struck me. Are there any, like, I don't want to take up too much of everyone's time on this, but were there any favorite tips that you like to tell people about?
So the one golden rule to remember with vegetables, more so than meat, is that vegetables contain a lot of water usually, and it's beneficial, but it's one of those conundrums and everything where it's you need it, but you also don't need too much of it. So with vegetables, when you cook them, it's a real challenge to get a crispy cauliflower. It's a real challenge to get crispy broccoli, carrots, because as they sit, the water makes the crust that you created all soft. So one of the things that I try to do, I tell people is there are a couple of things you can do. Salt them to kind of get rid of some of the excess liquid. If you're roasting them and you don't want to salt them, that's fine too. Put them on a wire rack. It's just one extra step. When you're roasting them in the oven, put a wire rack on your sheet pan. Put the vegetables on top, stick it in the oven. So that way, whatever liquid or steam's passing through drips to the bottom of the pan and it's drier. So that also then you don't have to worry too much about flipping things and tossing them. So that's one of the things that I tell people is to watch for the water. Applying baking soda to starchy vegetables really helps because it makes them crispy and brown fast. I wouldn't use it for things like onions and like broccoli and stuff, or anything that's pink in color. And if you want the pink color, because baking soda changes the pH and then makes everything green and it looks nasty. So like red onions turn green, it doesn't look nice. And also they can pull out too much water. So things become very wet. But water is the biggest thing to watch out for in roasting vegetables.
Interesting. Oh my God, I don't know how we got to almost 7:30 already. So I'm just gonna go through we're gonna do a little more rapid fire. But although actually we did some of these already, because I wanted to ask what your biggest challenge writing the book was. And I think unless there's one we haven't mentioned, schedule, of course, and being exhausted from being such a productive author. Was there anything else that surprised you? The
change in social media during this time.
Ooh, how long do you have?
The existential question. I feel so much changed when I started writing the book to when I finished the book that it's been a very different way for me to share the book with people and also make sure they actually see it, because just so much has changed. There's also this like video thing that when I started the book, I didn't think I needed to do that much video. Now that I've done the book, I have to do so much video. So they're interesting challenges to navigate. That's one thing that I did not expect.
Yeah, I mean, it's changed a lot. So you feel like it's the shift to video, and I also feel like it's the decentralization of social media, where I always joke, I'm like, if I'm doing a social media update, I'm doing it in like 7 places these days minimum.
Yeah,
and
it's a lot to keep up with.
7 comment sections, and it's just crazy. So the answer is no, I'm not. I'm never going to be on top of all like whatever pieces.
I've learned to come to terms with that.
Yeah, no, I think it's definitely good to be that you can be some places at some time and not all places at all times. Yeah, and I feel like the conversation has moved off our sites, but you're also you're doing Substack now, which is great. I'm sure that makes it a little bit easier to find like your people, and they always have very nice comment. The vibes are good in the comment
Absolutely, yeah.
sections.
I love doing the newsletter.
That's awesome. What was your favorite part of writing this book?
The illustrations. Not writing, I guess that's not the right answer. But I loved working on the illustrations because I'm not the illustrator on the book, so I can give input and critique someone else's work. But
You're
I draw them out.
so
Oh, yeah, those are so cool. My designer Lizzie Vaughn
gorgeous.
came up with that idea.
I hope
Uh,
you're doing like prints and stuff of these, right? You are, right? I just gave you something else to do as if rolling out of enough work.
I
Um,
No, so what I do is I kind of sketch them out on my iPad by hand. I draw them out because it's easier for me.
so the
And then from there, I send them to the illustrator who then reinterprets everything. And Matteo, he's an Italian, he's Italian, but he's an Italy-based artist
Mhm.
and does a lot of these technical type of format drawings for magazines and newspapers and books. And so he did the flavor equation. I said, okay, you have to do this one because he does it so well. And he also specializes in converting or rather creating technical illustrations for kids.
Oh, that's
And so
awesome.
that really helps make the tough stuff fun.
That's awesome. I noticed that when you're writing your recipes, that you are doing that thing where the ingredients are embedded. Like it's like add 1/3 of a cup of olive oil. Have you always done that, or was that something new with this book?
I used to, do you hear that?
Do you hear the background behind me? I feel like there's like
No, no, do
helicopters.
you hear my cat?
Oh no.
My nightmare cat. Sorry, the question was about the recipe salad writing.
Yeah, have you always done so what I in case somebody wasn't I don't like have
Yeah.
people looking at me confused, but basically this idea of like take 2 tablespoons of black pepper and add this, like so it's written into the description of the into the paragraph part of the recipe.
So when I write my recipes, I'm old fashioned. I write it in a notebook with pen and paper or pencil. And then I always develop my recipes in a flowchart format. So I say 2 tablespoons of olive oil, and then I write the temperature, like the medium heat, low heat, or the oven temperature, and I put an arrow, and then it goes to the next step.
Oh
So
wow.
one of the things I wanted to do for the uh, cookbook was make it very similar, casual, and so people just see in quickly, like these are the ingredients. This is when I need the 2 tablespoons of olive oil. And if I need 2 tablespoons of olive oil later, it's called for separately versus telling people 1/4 cup now. And then you have to divide it because it drives me crazy. And so this book is written with a more casual conversational narrative style. And it's a throwback also to the older cookbook days. So like The Joy of Cooking still does this.
Mhm.
I think Nigel Slater does this too. He used to do it
Mhm.
at least in his columns and his cookbooks.
Mhm.
I think David Chang recently did it in he did it in the microwave cookbook
Mhm.
that came out a couple of years ago. So I really wanted a fun narrative style because I didn't want this book to feel that serious, even though science is the premise of the book. The book is also about me cooking in the kitchen with you.
That's
And
great.
the photos are also like that, where I didn't do any selfies in Flavor Equation, but this book, you see me cooking in the kitchen, making pasta and stuff. So I wanted people to feel comfortable and not feel bogged down by details too much.
That's great. It definitely reduces the like amount of space that the recipes we have had. In my own books, we've had endless conversations about like how to fit everything on the pages with a photo for each, and it's not easy at all. So I think it looks really cool. And I noticed this. I think I had suggested this in my second book, and they were like, but I'm happy to see it taking off because maybe I'll soon get a chance to try it and what of mine if people are liking it. I'm sure I'll get email about this. So I already asked you about your book photos, and we talked a lot about. Did we do this? I don't think we talked about this. So we talked about like the science behind the cooking techniques in the book. Do you have like a favorite piece of food science trivia? Like one like if people could learn one thing from science that will endlessly improve their cooking, if they could just learn this one thing, they could tell like I don't want to read a science textbook. Tell me one thing.
One thing. Uh, I mean, Okay, this is a really
Oh
difficult
no.
stunt.
It could be two things. This is your party.
Definitely read a recipe before you start, like with the recipe. That I think is a general thing. But you don't, I feel like one of the things I have realized with people is that just because something says I know I'm stuck on olive oil, but if something says 2 tablespoons of olive oil, you do not have to use 2 tablespoons of olive oil with a vinaigrette. And this is something that because this book has a lot of salads, vinaigrettes come up
Mhm.
often. And I often get this question, why are your ratios for the vinaigrettes different sometimes?
Not
The
everyone
ideal
does the
ratio for
same.
all the ideal ratio for all to vinegar, I think, is usually 3:1. You can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but
I
it's
think
three
it's
parts of
yeah, and it's
oil.
usually a little mild tasting, to be
Yeah,
honest, that ratio.
but you don't have to use that because it's a
Mhm.
ratio between two things, right? The minute you add a third thing to it, the ratios change. So you can use less oil if you use an emulsifier. So if you're using mustard, you don't have to use that much olive oil because it'll hold together because of the mustard. You don't
Mhm.
have to stick to using that much olive oil. And I get this question a lot with people who are either older or trying to avoid consuming large amounts of oil for health reasons. And
Mhm.
I'm not by any means like a diet advocate or anything, but that's a really simple thing to think about, is that it's a ratio between two things that you start off with. When you add a third component, you can change things. And if you're using emulsifiers like mustard, garlic, you don't have to use that much oil. You can use more vinegar and get better flavor.
Also, I feel like as soon as you're putting a vinaigrette over like a warm vegetable salad or something like that, it just, I don't know, muffles it. So I feel like you need a stronger vinaigrette for like heavier things. You need a thinner, like more gentle vinaigrette for just like a little baby leaf salad kind of
Yeah.
thing. All right, so now I get to ask you the rest of the fun questions before we go to everybody else's more intelligent questions. um, Nick, do you have a favorite pet? Because I've noticed that you have like birthday parties for your dog. I don't think I've seen it.
I mean, if you're my cat right now crying like a banshee. The thing is, my cats are very attached to me. And so I started my tour on Monday. I left Monday morning. Last night, my husband called me up after I finished my dinner in Portland, and he said, so, you've been gone for a while, and I've technically been gone for 2 days. And he said, I've been giving gratitudes out to you. And I said, what do you mean? He said, I've been thanking you, but I don't want to tell you this, like talk about it too much because it'll blow your head out, your ego will get big, but really, like, you really run this house. And he said the pets are insane. But no, I feel like with dogs, they're just so affectionate, and they're better at least displaying human emotions and kind of dealing with it. My cats, when they want love, they come. When they don't want love, they will walk away and not come near you. They don't want to be near you. They only come when they have to be fed. Yeah, and when they have to be fed. So, and my dog, I love because, I live in LA. There's a dog and cat bakery close by, and they do all the most ridiculous cutesy things for my dog. And dogs and all pets live really short lives, so I love doing the best. Like, I literally have to sell a lot of copies of this book to support their lifestyle.
Listen, you can't spoil a dog. I do not believe you can just you are supposed to spoil your pets. This is like, what are they gonna do? Go up and be jerks or something? Like, go spoil your pets. I have to be careful, but you don't have to be in the same. All right. Do your pets have costumes for Halloween?
My dog has. So last year we bought him his first costume, and he was still kind of growing. So I bought him and it was a large alligator costume. And then I had to take it back to the store because within a week he couldn't squeeze in. Because he was he's a English lab, so they grow quite bulky on the chest. And so then he suddenly grew, and I had to get an extra large. I haven't tried it out on him yet. I'm hoping it fits because he stopped gaining weight. He's now fully formed. So I'm hoping it fits.
All right, couple more silly, slightly less serious questions. Do you have a favorite Halloween candy?
I do. Snickers.
What's the most cursed Halloween candy?
I don't know the right word for it, but it's the tri-colored white, orange,
The candy
yellow.
corn?
I don't like those. There's no flavor. It's just sweet.
I need to know how you feel about ranch dressing.
I like it.
It's okay.
Why am I supposed to have strong thoughts on it, or do people have
No,
strong?
I feel like some people are really repelled by creamy white dressings, and it's just
Okay.
curious.
I like mayo. I actually prefer my French fries with mayo or tartar sauce.
You do too, actually. I really do. I was a lot better person before I knew how good they were too. But like a good one. I feel like this is the Ioli's moment. How do we feel about flaming hot Cheetos?
Not a big Cheetos fan.
Sorry. I had to ask. I think orange cheese powder is a beautiful food science invention.
It's
Maybe
a
not
good
biological, but I
seasoning
think
on
it's
corn.
beautiful.
I've had it on corn here in LA. There's a restaurant. I can't remember the name of the restaurant, but there's a restaurant that does kind of like a Cheeto powder on top of creamed corn, and it's very tasty.
Okay. I mean, I would eat that. I would definitely eat that. All right. Do you have any opinions on Thanksgiving stuffing? Pro, against, or it has to be a specific way? You just find it weird. This is
No,
for a side project of mine. Just curious.
I like that. I mean, it's an adopted holiday for me because I didn't grow up with Thanksgiving, but I like the whole like ceremony of things. So like the stuffing, yeah, or dressing, whatever people call it, and that's like the biggest battle I feel. But I enjoy it. I try to change it up every year.
That's awesome. All right. Have you ever made Emily Mariko's salmon bowl?
No.
Okay. It's ask. It's very good. You should, yeah,
Okay.
you would like it.
Okay.
All right, I'm gonna get to the more serious questions from the more serious people because it looks like they're stacking up. Let's see if there's some good ones. Sorry. What do you think is an underrated vegetable? Peg wants to know.
What's an underrated vegetable? Cabbage. A lot of people seem to hate cabbage, which I'm surprised by, but when I talk to them, they say they usually boiled it with sausages. Actually, Kenji told me, have you had cabbage with boiled with sausages when he did my event this week? And I said, no, but that sounds kind of Irish because I know Irish people boil it with ham. And my friend Diana Henry is also a cookbook author, always says, Nick, a lot of Irish people hate cabbage because of the way we grew up eating cabbage. So I think it's that. But I like cabbage in all forms. It's still like the vegetable as a child that my mother said, what vegetable do you want to eat tonight? I'd say cabbage and potatoes. It's still cabbage. Nothing's changed.
I'm with you, but I didn't grow up eating it. I didn't grow up eating it, and I think because of that, I don't have any negativity associated with like nobody made me eat bowls of stewed cabbage. So I've always joked that I get to like love it with like the abandon of somebody who got to discover it on my own as an adult. I think, and what probably happened is the generational cycle where my mother grew up suffering through bowls of cabbage, and so she didn't make it, and so it kind of goes back around. But I think it's awesome. Do you think there's an overrated vegetable?
Brussels sprouts. I love Brussels sprouts, but I think restaurants have destroyed the experience of Brussels sprouts for me. Every single restaurant you go to in this country, they have burnt Brussels sprouts, caramelized Brussels sprouts, sweet Brussels sprouts. And even I, in my book, put a sweet and sticky Brussels sprouts that's caramelized. But every menu, and when we go out, I always tell my husband, no, Michael, you can't get the Brussels sprouts. We're not doing that. There are many other things to try on the menu. Try those things. But I feel Brussels sprouts are overdone at this point. And I think maybe because restaurants find them easier to prepare or prep and prepare in advance. They're on every menu in this country.
They really are. And there's always like chunks of bacon, chunks of cheese, chunks of like pickle. I always feel like there's just too many ingredients on them. Like I definitely ate them and I do eat them, but I always feel like at some point we're like trying to pretend they're not Brussels sprouts. Like the messages that Brussels sprouts taste bad. All right. Let's see. From Lee wants to know, for both Nick and Deb, what would be a legacy recipe from an elder in your family that was a challenge for you to get right? I feel like it's really noisy behind me. Is it distracting anyone, all the noise outside?
I don't hear anything.
I don't know what's going on in Union Square, New York right now, but something noisy.
It might be my cat's voice, just
I don't even hear your cats.
Okay. For me, it's the cabbage rolls that I did in the book because my grandmother used to make that with she used to stuff cabbage leaves with ground beef and then cook them in like a tomato stew type thing. And for me, that was difficult dish to kind of replicate because I inherited my grandmother's recipe book after she passed. That was given to me. That and her wine decanter, because she used to have port wine every night before going to bed. Have that.
That's incredible. I'm sorry, I was looking for the page because I just had it open. It's such a beautiful photo.
But yeah, that's a recipe that I struggle because she didn't really have like instructions on how to fold them. And I didn't realize that you have to dip them in boiling water to soften them, and then you do it. Because when I took the whole cabbage leaves and they cracked every time initially.
Okay. And you really need to use Savoy cabbage. Although some people, they pour boiling. I think my mother-in-law, she cores it and then she pours boiling water over it in the sink. So it kind of wilts it.
Okay.
And then just lets it drain out. But you could probably salt it too. But yeah, I haven't made that in a long time. Let's see. Photography, talk about photography. To segue. Do you somebody wait, I just lost. Oh, there is Patricia's question. She said to segue from the flavor equation, which she has and loves, how does the way you cut vegetables affect the flavor and why?
Oh, that's such a good question. Very good question. In onions, it's probably the easiest place to decipher this on the spot. If you cut onions, the wider you cut an onion, so if it's just large chunks, they won't be as spicy. Because the number of cells that are exposed when they're cut are fewer. So there's less of that enzyme that makes us cry come out. If you chop and mince an onion up fine, you're going to cry because more cells are chopped up. So the flavor is more pungent. You'll be crying faster. So an onion is probably the best place to kind of notice this. So in general, in my experience, the more vegetable is chopped up fine and then cooked, the flavor intensity that you experience initially is quite strong, but it's also the fastest way to lose flavor because the surface area that's exposed is just so much.
You know, when and this is not time for my questions, but whenever I've made like a Hasselback potato, I can't, and there's definitely a food science thing here because I feel like it takes both forever to cook and also never gets cooked. And I think it's because like it's too thin and maybe it dries out before it cooks, if that makes sense, those leaves. But I feel like you can cook it for an hour. Like a roast potato doesn't even take that long and it still doesn't really get whatever the internet promised me I'd get out of Hasselback potatoes. Anyway, it's not 2019, so we're probably not making Hasselback potatoes.
No, I feel like that's a really good point with Hasselback potatoes. You're right, because the surface area is so much, whatever moisture that you were originally relying on when you just like cover them and roast them is gone really fast. So you don't have it doesn't get enough time to cook properly. And it's drier.
Was there a cool, Peg wants to know if there was the best vegetable fact you uncovered while researching.
The best vegetable fact. Oh my gosh. I call this the poisonous lives of vegetables. So when I was reading about vegetables and going through like all these historical documents, a lot of vegetables, because for the longest time, animal poisons came much later into use. For the longest time, plant poisons were used all over the world in ancient cultures to even the times of Agatha Christie. Novels. So like in Turkish courts, they would Turkish royal courts, they would take physin, which is the toxin that comes out from the latex of the fig tree, and poison people with them who they didn't like and to have their way. It's fascinating. And even like bamboo has been used because raw bamboo is toxic. It has to be boiled before it can be eaten, and it has cyanides in it, and that's another thing that people would play around with to kill people or make them sick.
Isn't rhubarb leaves are also poisonous, right?
Yeah, you have to cook them down. No one eats the leaves.
Nobody.
So they don't even cook them up, but you're supposed to.
Sometimes I hear stuff like that. And I'm like, there should be like a bigger sign here. Like there should be a sign. I don't think anyone is eating rhubarb for the leaves, but like I'm not that smart. Like I would not know that I could not try the leaf. I mean, maybe not that small amount would.
I know if I hadn't known about that, I would have attempted to do something like waste not kind of strategy and cooked it.
Let's see. Lee says Nick mentions vegetables that are in season. When we can't have like seasonal vegetables, are there forms of vegetables that you think have more value for our health benefit, i.e. frozen or shipped from the other side of the planet? I guess it sounds like are there vegetables that when they're not fresh you think are still pretty good representations. And that was actually something I wanted to ask too, because, you know, here on the East Coast by February, the grocery store is about as sad as it's still being winter as we are. So,
Yeah, that's one of I think that's a really important question, because I've noticed there's a shame, and especially with like the food world, we try to shame people and tell them not to use canned or frozen food. And that's actually not the right thing to do, because number one, technology has changed quite a bit. Food technology is constantly being, perfected by companies to make sure that the canned vegetables still retain their texture, nutrient quantity and stuff. So in this day and age, a lot of canned food is actually quite superior. It saves you time, it's cheaper often. Nutrient quality is often better with frozen foods, because the way frozen food quality is measured is by looking at vitamin C content. Vitamin C is the first index to look at to show that quality is deteriorating, because it decreases really rapidly. And they measure that constantly with frozen vegetables and with canned food. With frozen food, it's packed initially. As soon as it comes out, it's cleaned, minimally processed, sometimes chopped like the cut French green beans. They put them in bags and it's kept away, right? When you buy green beans from the grocery store, it's traveled quite a few places, even at the farmer's market. I'm not saying don't buy them, but if you have to go buy frozen, absolutely fine. I do that with okra too, and there's an okra chapter in the book. I tell people just use frozen if you can't find it. It's chopped, and you don't really care about the texture. It doesn't have to be that firm when it's in a stew. So yes, use frozen or canned food. In this day and age, there's no shame in using it. The quality is often superior.
It really is a shame when people feel like there is shame to it, when it makes sense. It's actually beautiful that we have these ways to process vegetables so we can eat in the off season and not be limited to like what we canned and jarred in the summer. Like, I'm not a homesteader. Cans and jarred, so I was thinking about that a little bit more in my last book too, where anytime I could, I was testing something with the frozen equivalent just to see what would happen, because somebody, it's all they have and they'd like to know. In fact, I developed a pea pancake, which is fantastic with frozen peas, and I love using the whole bag. And also I loved learning that you don't really need to defrost them to cook with them. So it was like such a cool little like fritter that you get to do. I think the biggest frustration people have is usually probably when they try to roast them. It's like really hard to get frozen vegetables crisp again.
Yeah, because it takes a little more time and so much water comes out.
It's just, I think it's like the cell wall. Okay, I'm not going to do that. So Sue asked, how do you prevent zucchini from getting soggy instead of crispy?
Okay, so it depends on the recipe, obviously. Now, if you're going to do like a zucchini cake, I tell people microwave the zucchini with a little bit of sugar and salt, and that will get rid of a lot of liquid. If you don't have a microwave, you just warm it up just to get like enough liquid out. So that's one way if you're making like a zucchini loaf. If you're doing a zucchini pancake, like a savory zucchini pancake, again, you don't want too much liquid because it starts to ooze out over time. That's a really good way to do it. Just heat it up with a little bit of salt. If it's a savory pancake, get like about, from a pound, get maybe like 1 cup of liquid, throw it out. Now, if you're doing something like grilling, with grilling, sometimes what I like to do is I cut the vegetables, salt them very gently, and then let them sit on a clean towel, kitchen towel, and let the water come out. Then what I do is I rinse off the excess salt and then grill them. I pat them dry and then grill them. So that's another way to do it.
And you find that it really gets more crisp that way? Because I've done it for like frying, I've done it for roasting. One thing I like is that it tastes seasoned throughout and not just seasoned at the edges, which is always a nice experience when you're eating a vegetable that isn't known for its robust flavor. Awesome. I'm gonna try it.
Yeah, and the one thing with crispy vegetables in general, they're crispiest as soon as they come off the heat. If you're going to eat it the next day, it's going to be soft. An air fryer will help you get it slightly crispier. But a vegetable by nature just has a lot of water in it, so you have to accept that.
Honestly, I feel that way when I do like a roast chicken too. I just recently did this recipe where you get their thighs. Yeah, they're going to start crisp, but like they're not going to stay crisp. You can start with the crispiest skin in the world, but as it sits, the steam's going to come through the skin. Yeah. And I have made peace with that. I think any recipe that tells you it's not going to do that is kind of deliberately misleading you or trying to sell you something. Okay, so let's see. We've got, I think we know the answer to this. Anissa, I think I hope I'm saying her name correctly. Wants to know if you could only eat one vegetable for the rest of your life, what would it be? Would it be cabbage?
Potatoes. So we gave cabbage so much of love. Potatoes.
Potatoes. I know, right? We could live on them. Potato chips, French fries, hash browns. I think that's a good choice because I would pick something ridiculous like an artichoke because it's my favorite vegetable, but yeah,
Sure.
that's not very
Much-
practical. What are you doing, Deb? You're gonna die. I think this is a good wrap-up question, I think.
Okay.
Jan Katie wants to know what is next for you in your fascinating career life?
What is next for me in my
You're gonna
fascinating?
feed a cat.
Maybe we'll do a cat birthday. What is next? Shoot, I'm working on a new book after this, obviously, like you hinted earlier.
We do not
But I
have to talk
haven't
about it yet,
started-
don't worry.
I haven't started working on it. I haven't even created a Word document, but I do have a book that I'll start working on next year. But that would probably be like the thing that I'm looking forward to next.
Awesome. It's great. Sorry, my notifications are not up. Well, thank you so much. And
Thank
I hope everyone enjoyed our conversation. And I did. And it was
This was
fun
so
hanging
much
out with
fun.
you.
Thank you, Deb.
I just want to
Thank
thank
you.
you both for joining us, and I included again if you wanted to check out Nick's book Veg-Table is available at the Learned Owl, so please click the link in the chat. And I also included links if you'd like to follow Nick and Deb at their respective blogs and their sites and see what they're up to next. Thank you guys for joining us this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night, everyone.
Bye. Have a good evening.